Dear friends, welcome to another episode of our channel. Today we are going to talk about a topic that should be at the center of attention of every Brazilian, but which, unfortunately, remains forgotten: the serious lack of preparation of our armed forces. Recently, Brazil's defense minister, José Múcio, made statements that sound like a real red alert for our country. In an interview with Metropolis, he revealed a worrying situation, especially in the Brazilian Air Force, FAB. We are talking about an institution that is facing serious operational difficulties, with fighter jets and combat aircraft grounded due to a lack of fuel and essential parts for maintenance. This means that, on paper, we have an air force, but in practice, many of these planes cannot even fly. While the world around us is arming itself and preparing for increasingly uncertain and dangerous times, Brazil seems to be going against the grain, increasingly reducing its defense budget. A 2.6 billion Brazilian reals cut to the armed forces has been announced, and this impacts not only aircraft maintenance, but also the transportation of authorities and the institution's ability to respond to emergencies. This disinvestment is not something that only affects the FAB. It affects all areas of the armed forces, undermining our ability to act effectively in the face of internal and external challenges. To understand the gravity of the situation, it is important to look at the international and regional scenario. In South America, for example, countries such as Venezuela, Chile, and Peru invest significantly in their military forces and today have more robust and ready capabilities than ours. Venezuela even has a military contingent comparable to that of Brazil, which shows how we are losing space and military importance in the region. This, for a country the size and wealth of Brazil, is alarming. Why is this situation so serious? Because Brazil is not only a large country in terms of territory, but it also holds one of the world's largest reserves of strategic natural resources, such as rare earths. These minerals are vital for global industry and for the manufacture of modern military equipment, including weapons and defense systems. What happens when a country rich in strategic resources becomes militarily vulnerable? It becomes a target. Major military and industrial powers pay close attention to who possesses these resources, and if the defense is weak, sovereignty is threatened. It is no wonder that, in the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the Ukrainian regions richest in natural resources are being the most disputed and invaded. The same could happen to Brazil if there is no urgent reinforcement of our defense. Another point worth highlighting is Brazil's technological dependence on foreign suppliers. Although we have national defense industries such as Embraer, Avibras, and other technology centers, many of the components used in our equipment are imported. This creates a strategic vulnerability, as an embargo or diplomatic crisis could interrupt the supply chain and leave our armed forces without the resources needed for maintenance or production. To make matters worse, the current disinvestment also affects the security of sensitive regions of the country, especially the Amazon. The forest, rich in biodiversity and mineral resources, is a route for trafficking arms and drugs that finance organized crime. Without a well-equipped and agile military force to act, control over this crucial region is compromised, opening the way for threats ranging from crime to invasion by external forces. In this scenario, the question remains clear: how can we guarantee Brazil's sovereignty and security if our armed forces are increasingly weakened? What the defense minister warns about is an issue that should concern us all. It is time to reflect on the real situation in our country, understand the risks, and, most importantly, discuss what we can do to change this situation before it is too late. Following our understanding of the worrying scenario of national defense, we need to look carefully at the impacts that this disinvestment brings to Brazil on different fronts. Minister José Múcio stressed that the budget crisis is not only affecting the aviation sector, but the entire structure of the armed forces, hampering the maintenance of equipment, the acquisition of new weapons, and the ability to respond quickly to emergencies and threats. This means that in critical situations, whether natural, such as floods and landslides, or caused by social crises and conflicts on the border, Brazil may simply not be prepared to act effectively and immediately. Let's imagine a simple but frightening scenario. The Amazon, our largest environmental and strategic reserve, which, in addition to its ecological importance, is a region of great economic and geopolitical interest. With the growth of drug and arms trafficking in the region, coupled with pressure from neighboring countries such as Venezuela, which has increased its military capacity, Brazil needs to be ready to defend its sovereignty and combat these threats. However, the current situation makes this mission difficult. The lack of resources prevents the maintenance of military bases, the acquisition of vehicles and aircraft, and the modernization of communication and intelligence systems. As a result, the region's security is compromised, and control over the world's largest tropical forest is vulnerable to illegal actions and invasions. Another critical factor is the technological dependence we mentioned earlier. Although we have highly developed national defense industries, such as Embraer Defense and Security and Avibras, a significant portion of the components used in our military equipment come from abroad. In a context of international tensions, this represents an enormous risk. An embargo or cut in the supply of these parts could paralyze the production of new equipment and, even more seriously, prevent the maintenance of those already in operation. This could leave our armed forces unable to act effectively, precisely at a time when the country's security would need it most. The clearest example to help us understand this vulnerability is what happened with Ukraine. The conflict with Russia highlighted how much external dependence can be a weakness. Even with international support, there were challenges in maintaining the constant flow of weapons, ammunition, and parts for essential equipment. In the case of Brazil, this dependence makes the need to invest in and strengthen our technological and industrial capacity even more urgent. It is necessary to increase national autonomy in strategic sectors to prevent us from being caught unprepared and vulnerable in a crisis. Finally, we must emphasize that investment in defense is not just a military issue. It is a fundamental strategy to guarantee the country's stability, protect our natural resources, and ensure our sovereignty in an increasingly competitive and divided world. While many nations are increasing their military spending and developing new defense technologies, Brazil has adopted a stance of retraction, which, if it continues, could leave us in a position of weakness and exposure. It is no exaggeration to say that, without urgent changes, our country could lose control of strategic regions and open space for foreign interests to exploit our resources in a predatory manner. The question that Minister José Múcio poses is blunt. What will we do to prevent this from happening? How can we ensure that Brazil is prepared to defend its territory and its interests when the global scenario becomes increasingly unstable? Brazilian Defense Minister José Múcio warned about the serious lack of preparation of the Brazilian armed forces, especially the Brazilian Air Force, FAB, which is facing a lack of fuel, parts, and maintenance for its aircraft. As the world increases military spending due to global tensions and disputes over strategic resources, Brazil has drastically reduced its defense budget, including a cut of 2.6 billion reais. The scarcity of resources compromises not only the operational capacity of fighter jets, but also the transportation of authorities and prompt response to emergencies, putting national sovereignty at risk. Neighboring countries such as Venezuela, Chile, and Peru have more prepared and better equipped military forces, causing Brazil to lose prominence in South America. Brazil is rich in strategic resources, such as rare earths, which are increasingly disputed globally and essential for industry and defense, making the country a target of interest for major powers. Brazil's technological dependence on foreign equipment and parts creates vulnerabilities, as embargoes or diplomatic ruptures can paralyze military maintenance and production. The precarious situation of the armed forces also affects the control and security of the Amazon, a strategic region vulnerable to transnational crimes and external pressures. The global context shows the importance of prepared armed forces, as exemplified by the crisis in Ukraine, where the dispute over natural resources intensifies conflicts. The minister warns that Brazil needs to invest in defense to guarantee stability, protect its resources, and maintain sovereignty, avoiding becoming an easy target for internal and external threats.